Hello and welcome to you at the Smith Street Mall here in Raintree Park this morning. The light is filtering down through the trees. It's a little cloudy here in Darwin this morning, but I don't think it's an omen. Candidates, don't freak out. It'll be okay. My name's Kate O'Toole and with me here is Alyssa from the ABC's 7:30 NT program. And today is your chance to put the questions you would like to ask to the candidates for the seat of Solomon. Put them on the spot. You have to vote 1 week and 1 day from now. So who's up to the job of representing you in federal parliament? We will hopefully find out today. Don't forget, there was less than 900 votes in it last time around, so your vote really does count. Have a word to Mickey over here or to Tim as well, who's currently, oh, here he is. Tim Moore as well, if you would like to ask a question this morning. Elizabeth, could you introduce our candidates?
Alrighty. So closest to us in the white shirt, looking very crisp, is Luke Gosling from Labor. In the middle there, looking quite relaxed, is Todd Williams from Greens. And our current incumbent, looking very classy, is Natasha Griggs from the Country Liberal Party. Now, in the 2010 election, all three parties actually attracted about 95.8% of the vote. So also joining us that are in the crowd at the moment, and if you could just stand up when I introduce you, if that's possible. We have Martin Burgess from the Voluntary Euthanasia Party. We also have Paul Selleck from the Rise Up Australia Party. And I believe we also have Rosalie Kunoth-Monks as well. She's just there. Now, she's not actually standing in the seat of Solomon. She's going to be standing in the Senate for the Australia's First Nations political party, but she's taking the place of Eileen Cummings, who I believe is away on sorry business at the minute. And that's it.
We don't have Trudy Campbell at this point, and oh, there she is, down the back. So to let you know the basic rules of engagement here today, the candidates will have a maximum of 2 minutes to answer any questions directed to them. Alyssa Betts is our bell ringer. She'll let candidates know when they have 30 seconds to wrap up. But candidates, I would put it to you that brevity is the soul of wit. And I don't know, there may be a bit of audience appreciation if you even beat the bell. Who knows? Let's begin, shall we? Start your engines, candidates. And let's hear our first question today.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I live and work in the Solomon electorate, and I would like to know where the candidates stand on equal marriage rights. I've asked both candidates before about this and haven't got a straight answer. If there was a conscience vote allowed by Kevin Rudd or Tony Abbott, where would you vote on this issue?
That's Rachel Brindle from Alloa, and we'll take the incumbent Natasha Griggs first, if you could.
Okay, sure. So my position is well known on this, and if there is a conscience vote, I guess it's up to you to decide with your conscience. And I guess it's really important that people realise that just because your view is different to someone else's, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. I've engaged with a number of people in the electorate about this particular issue, which is a very emotive issue. But at the moment, in this Parliament, we actually voted on this issue, and it was voted down. There's no plan for it to be put up again.
So I'm asking you, what would your conscience tell you if there was a conscience vote on this issue?
Well, how will I vote? Well, I wouldn't support it. And that's why I said my position on this is well known.
The Labor candidate, Luke Gosling.
It is a good question. To be honest, it hasn't come up much in my consultations with the community for whatever reason, but I've been door knocking and talking to people for about close on 8 months now. And the tally of for and against is about even at about 8 people all that have raised the issue. So that's out of 55,000 voters. So just to give you some perspective on, it doesn't seem to be a massive issue out there, but it is a massive issue for the people that are affected by it. So what I would then say is that I'm a Catholic that has been married in the Catholic Church, and I do not support anyone saying to a religious organisation that they have to marry people that they don't want to. What I I also believe is that church and the state can have different positions on an issue such as same-sex marriage. And I do not judge people and their relationships. I value love in a relationship and commitment, and that does not require, that can be acknowledged by the state. So if that vote was to come to the Parliament, I am open to allowing loving couples that want to make a commitment to be respected in that way.
And the Greens candidate, Todd Williams.
I think the question really wasn't involving so much the church issue on that. It's whether same-sex couples can have basic equality under the law and to be able to be married. In our society, there's too much breaking down of couples. Marriage is the basic building block of our society, and we should honour people who want to get married. We should not discriminate against people in love who want to honour their relationship in front of their friends and family and to be recognised by law. It's a basic human right. And years from now, we're going to be looking back on this with disbelief that it took so long to come to the party. Australia is trailing really, really badly on this issue, and it's about time that we took the step and made marriage equality for everyone in Australia.
That's Todd Williams from the Greens. Thank you, Rachel, for your question. Now, our next question is from Tony Vine Bromley.
Good morning. My name's Tony Vine Bromley. I'm from NT Shelter. And one thing I think that's very important particularly in the Darwin area, is housing affordability. We've seen around 200 of the national rental affordability schemes come to fruition in the Northern Territory, although it's been running nationally since 2008. What are the major parties' positions on continuing the national rental affordability scheme, which provides low to moderate income people with a discounted market rent in this hugely expensive community that we live in?
We'll start this one with a Labor candidate, if we could. Luke Gosling.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Tony. We're very proud of the National Rental Affordability Scheme, and it is delivering here in Solomon. In fact, just a couple of days ago, we had the Deputy Prime Minister in town announcing another 133 properties. We've already delivered close to 200. That is rental properties that are out there in the community right now, with another 700 already in the pipeline.
The original promise, though, Luke Gosling, though, wasn't it 1,200 back in 2010?
So there was some difficulties in rolling out the program, but in consultation and partnership with the NT government, we've made sure that those properties, the land, that can be fast-tracked now. So we have delivered already, and we will continue to deliver. Now, some people may not think that 20% below market rate is enough for a lot of people to get into the housing and rental market, and they'd be right when they say that. So to homeless people in particular, what we need to do, and Kevin Rudd led the way with the National Partnership Agreement on homelessness, and there's been an unprecedented focus on millions of dollars going into accommodation like that we see at St Vincent de Paul, that was funded to enable people to get off the street and then to step into other forms of accommodation as they get back on their feet. And that is incredibly important, and it's something that we're absolutely dedicated to. And as I said, we've just announced further funding for NRAS, so we are committed to it, Tony.
The incumbent, Natasha Griggs.
So we also matched the NRAS commitment that was made by Labor in 2010, and said that if we were in government, that we would also match that commitment and build those houses. Obviously, we're in opposition, so we couldn't build any of those houses. We haven't made a commitment at this election. We haven't made a commitment in terms of the housing at this stage. Tony, you know that I've been a strong advocate for the RAF-based houses, because there was 395 houses sitting there vacant that the Labor government just allowed to sit there and rot away, when they could have given had an arrangement with the Northern Territory government to provide to use those houses. Although the Labor government is continuing to remove those houses those RAF-based houses. I still haven't given up the fight and believe that there is still nearly 300 houses that should a coalition government be elected on September 7, those houses would be made available to Territorians.
How would you make them available?
Made them available to the Northern Territory government.
They already are.
Excuse me, Luke. How are they already available to the Northern Territory government?
So 277 of the houses on the RAF pace have been sold, and they're going to be made available at a cheap rate to Territorians that need to get a house.
Can we just go back to the NRAS? Natasha, you said that you made that commitment back in 2010. Would you finish off NRAS?
So sorry, Alyssa. Labor made the announcement, and they also made it in 2007 as well. So it was a re-announcement in 2010, and we matched that announcement in 2010. Said if we were in government, we would match that. We weren't in government, we were in opposition. We haven't made any housing announcements. We've still got one more week of policy announcements to make. So
Can we expect an announcement in the next week?
I'm not going to make any announcements here today about what we're going to do. They've got a week left of this campaign. Oh.
All right.
Listening to this election forum for the seat of Solomon, the candidates are here. You just heard from the Country Liberals' Natasha Griggs, Todd Williams from the Greens.
Yeah, look, the Greens have long supported very, very strong solutions to homelessness. In real terms, in Darwin, it's particularly important. The Darwin-Palmerston region, our Solomon electorate, we've seen anecdotally public housing being stripped from our city. We've seen it in Parap, we've seen it with the closing down of Kringle, we've seen old Darwin families moved out of public housing to the outskirts of the Darwin-Palmerston area where there's very, very poor public transport. The Greens have long advocated that we should, instead of building suburban sprawl and release of land, we should concentrate on infilling where there's lots of public transport routes and build up the cities that way. Prices in Darwin have tripled. Rental prices in Darwin have tripled since 2000. That's enormous, and there's people who are being moved from middle class to lower class because they're spending so much money on rents. It's an emergency, and the Greens have a policy called Take the Pressure Off, which pledges 85,000 new rental properties around Australia. And the Northern Territory, because of its need, if we hold the balance of power in the Senate, and that's very, very important for the Greens, that we will push whichever major party holds the power of reins after this election.
How many of those houses would be for the Territory?
It's hard to say at this stage, but we have a disproportionate need in the Northern Territory. So, yeah.
How would you pay for it?
How would we pay for it? That would be held in discussions with the major parties. Obviously, the Greens in the Senate have pushed the Gillard government into the Clean Energy Act almost against their will. It cost them a lot of political will, but that was a landmark bit of legislation, and those details we worked out.
You're listening to ABC Local Radio right across the top end. Kate O'Toole with you, and Elizabeth from 7:30 NT is here as well. We're sitting with our candidates for the seat of Solomon for the ABC's election forum for the seat of Solomon. It's nearly 20 past 11. How time flies when you're having fun. Our next question is from Lauren.
Thanks. The nomination of Muckaty as the site for Australia's first national radioactive waste dump has been opposed across the NT for the last 6 years and by Muckaty traditional owners in the federal court. Solomon forms part of the proposed transport route with Australian radioactive waste returning from overseas, destined to come through the port of Darwin to Muckaty down the Stuart Highway. We know the candidates all oppose siting a radioactive waste dump at Muckaty, but would you support calls from peak national health, environment and trade union groups for a national commission to consider all options for radioactive waste management, not just remote dumping options?
First we'll go to Natasha Griggs.
Well, my position on this issue is quite well known, and
Could you just articulate it for us?
Okay, well, I crossed the floor on the nuclear waste facility within the first 6 months of me being in the Parliament, and I went against my party, and it was something very difficult to do because as a first-term member of Parliament, you get all excited about what you're going to do before you enter into Parliament, and then you actually get into Parliament, and then you've got to stand there and live to what you follow up with what you said. So I'm not someone that says one thing before an election and does something after. So I said before I got elected that I would stand up for the people of the Territory and oppose the nuclear waste facility, and that's what I did.
We'll put the question
My
out
position has not changed. I still am opposed to the nuclear waste facility being in the Northern Territory.
Luke
Okay?
Gosling, candidate for Labor.
So, thanks. And thanks for the question. Natasha didn't quite get there. Not in support. Will stand up for the Territory and will do everything in my power to ensure that decisions are made based on science, and will stand up for what the Territory wants. I mean, that's what we actually need
Labor
in Canberra.
supported the nuclear waste facility.
We only
they campaigned
have-
against it and then went and voted on it.
Sorry, Natasha.
Trish Crossan and Warren Snowden.
We
Both. They
only
promised they
have...
wouldn't, and then they voted against it. So are you going to do the same thing? Oh, it's okay for him to interrupt me, but I'm not allowed to interrupt him. Oh, please, come on.
So we only have one federal representative for Darwin and Palmerston down in Canberra. And I've actually been working down there for part of the last term, and we have not had it. Trust me, we have not had it. In fact, what we've had is an ex-CLP Chief Minister come out and say that Mrs Griggs isn't standing up for the Territory.
If we could just redirect back to the question here, Luke Gosling. The question was from Lauren, and her question was about your support or otherwise for the waste dump at Muckaty, and whether or not you would also support calls to gather a national commission to consider a lot of other potential impacts of a waste facility.
Yeah, I think that any decision on nuclear waste is an incredibly important one, and we need to make sure that we've looked at all the issues that are going to have an impact on the Territory. And I'm just giving that commitment, as I'll ensure that we do go through those processes so that any decision made that has an effect on the Territory will consider the impacts.
Todd Williams.
Our position on Muckaty is very, very clear, and uranium generally as well. This Muckaty station's been, the Northern Territory by Canberra is viewed as something that's easy and open and that can be foisted upon to store nuclear waste. Australia is looked upon the rest of the world as open and easy for the storage of nuclear waste. It's not too hard to fathom that this is the thin end of the wedge, and that Muckaty will be used to store some of the most dangerous waste in the world for profit, against the wishes of the traditional people. There's a challenge in the federal court in regards to the positioning of Muckaty Station, and so we say no, and we totally support a review of where our nuclear waste will be stored. Absolutely.
That is Todd Williams from the Greens. You're listening to ABC Local Radio across the top end. Kate O'Toole with you. This is our election forum for the seat of Solomon. If you would like to ask a question of the candidates, then please have a little chat to our ABC colleagues here in the red shirt, Tim Moore over there, or Mick Murdoch over here as well. Our next, somebody who has had a bit of a chat to ABC colleagues in red shirts, but who is a little bit shy to speak on the microphone herself, is Mary. She wants to know what Martin Burgess from the Euthanasia Party really stands for. We can hear from Martin Burgess.
I'm standing for the seat of Solomon for the Voluntary Euthanasia Party. We are unashamedly a one-issue party for the rights of the terminally ill to die with dignity. Assurance... Thank you. Assurance of a dignified death would improve the quality of life for many terminally ill people and allow them the time they have left to be enjoyed by removing the fear and uncertainty of how and when they would die. In some cases that I know of, expected lifespan and well-being have actually increased quite dramatically. Thank you.
Martin Burgess is from the Voluntary Euthanasia Party. I might just put that idea to the major candidates as well. According to the ABC's Vote Compass survey of around 1 million Australians, more people are in favour of voluntary euthanasia than, for instance, same-sex marriage. 75% of all respondents said that they were in favour of voluntary euthanasia. Would you take this issue to your party, or how would you stand on this issue? Natasha Griggs.
So this is another conscience issue vote. In my 20s, I was absolutely a big advocate of voluntary euthanasia. But in my 30s, I was diagnosed with cancer. So my position on that issue changed, and I'm a big advocate for palliative care and support. My sister-in-law is a nurse in palliative care, and I think that there needs to be more funding and support around that particular issue. So there you go.
Would you fight for the Territory to have the right to be able to legislate on euthanasia?
Look, absolutely. I've made it very clear that I will always stand up for Territorians and that is a conscience issue vote, and it is up to Territorians. Just because I personally don't believe in an issue doesn't mean that I won't stand there in my party room and stand up for Territorians. I've done it before and I will do it again.
Labor candidate Luke Gosling.
As I just mentioned before, the reason that former CLP Chief Minister Marshall Perrin had a crack at Mrs Griggs...
That wasn't particularly about euthanasia, though. That was territory rights, not to do with euthanasia.
Was for not standing up for territory rights.
Slightly different issue, though. Can we get back to the topic? Where do you stand on euthanasia?
I don't think it's a different topic in terms of territory rights. We need more rights for us in the territory.
If we could just get back to you, Luke, where do you stand on euthanasia?
Yeah, I actually take territory rights very, very seriously, and I will stand up for the territory. When it comes to voluntary euthanasia, I actually have a bit more in common with my opponent in that I think that personally caring for people, palliative care, is important, because the great gift of life must always be cherished. And nowadays, with care plans that people can have with their doctor, and let's face it, this is an issue that people work through with their family and their carers. So,
excuse me, I would ask the audience to respect that this is our forum, and I appreciate your contribution, but if you could just... Yes, but we just need to run according to some rules. And if you were hosting it, then you could definitely move them along. I understand your point, but if you could just let him finish now. He's only got 20 seconds left.
It's a good point, well made, mate. Look, what I will fight for, regardless of my personal view, is the right of Territorians to make laws for ourselves, and that is important.
Todd Williams from the Greens. Look, I've had the mixed blessing of seeing two very a close friend and my father pass away from cancer. My close friend Warren Owen, he's it was a wonderful time and a terrible time, and he had the best palliative care out of the hospital. I could see that he was kept comfortable, but the bottom line is that I support the right for people to die with dignity. That they could really have a long and lingering terrible last year or 6 months or 18 months of their life going through some really terrible times. If they make that really, really terrible decision to end their lives, and it's not taken lightly, it is not a decision, it's done in consultation with friends and family. I was just so proud of the Northern Territory when we introduced that law. It was a forward, progressive thinking law, and I support voluntary euthanasia, yes.
That was Todd Williams from the Greens.
The Solomon Election Forum with Kate O'Toole and Alyssa Betts, asking your questions of the candidates on 105.7 ABC Darwin.
And here with us today are the candidates for the seat of Solomon. My name's Kate O'Toole, and with me is Alyssa Betts from 7:30 NT. And we have another question from Kay.
Natasha, as a self-funded retiree, I'd like to know, do you support Mr Abbott's proposed plan of parental support for mothers to stop at home?
The paid parental leave?
The paid parental.
I do, Kay. I do support. It's actually coalition policy about the paid parental leave, and that's actually something that has been raised a number of times with me while I've been out door knocking, and that the paid parental leave will actually be funded by the big business companies.
It's not totally funded by big business,
and
though,
that there will be an impact on.
Who is going to support the big business? Will these people that are now getting in the money, will they support the big business when they go down the hill? We'll have to see about that.
I guess, Natasha,
take it on
Griggs,
notice.
One question: why should taxpayers partly fund a scheme that would give $75,000 to somebody on 150 grand a year?
So you might be interested to know that it's not about the rich. There's about 1% of women earn over $100,000 in Australia of childbearing years, and you reckon that's not enough?
I don't think there should be more women earning more money.
So the average. I agree. So the average income of women in childbearing years is $65,000. So this is another furphy about that. This is a benefit for the rich, and this class warfare that Labor have been running. This is not about class warfare, and I absolutely support. I think that we should have more women out at home. The first 6 months of a child's life is the most important time of their life.
But what about somebody earning $150,000? I know you say there's not many, but they would be getting 75 grand. Taxpayers are partly funding that scheme. Why should somebody get $75,000?
We also have now a generation of under our scheme, women also get superannuation. We now have a generation of women in their 50s and 60s who have very little superannuation because they were at home bringing up the family. So I'm sorry if I'm a big advocate for women getting some superannuation and then they can pay their mortgage. I'm sorry.
We'll just have to stop you there. Okay, so we'll go on to Labor's Luke Gosling.
So lower paid women, you're taking 15% of their super contributions, and you say you're looking at 2 million women in this country are earning below $37,000, and they are taking 15% of the super. So that's not really supporting women. It's a bit of a shame.
If you could address the issue,
more Labor lies.
Luke Gosling, if you could address the issue of paid parental leave.
Sure. Labor introduced paid parental leave. Labor has a scheme that is in place, that is fair, that is funded.
Does it include superannuation?
And we've already had 2,000 women in Darwin and Palmerston who have benefited from our paid parental leave, which is fair, unlike Mr Abbott and Mrs Griggs's scheme, which is going to take from the less able and give to those who are most able to fund their families.
So you think it's okay that public servants get paid maternity leave, but you don't think that the retailers don't get paid maternity leave?
So what Labor is doing and what Labor will always do is bring fairness to this country, support women on low incomes, because we know that they raise a family and get by on meagre wages at times, and we're supporting them so that they can have that time with their family. Our scheme is in place and it's working. Theirs is unaffordable and unfair.
You're listening to ABC Local Radio across the territory. This is our Solomon Election Forum. It's 25 minutes to 12, only 25 minutes left. We might gallop on here, Todd, if you'll forgive us. I think it's time to move on. Stacey, who's a nurse, has a question for the panel.
Hi, I'm Stacey. I'm an emergency department nurse at the public hospital, and I understand that there's been plans to build a Palmerston hospital, but I want to know, what are we going to do in the meantime? It's already overcrowded. The conditions are already pretty bad as it is.
We'll put this to the sitting member for Solomon, Natasha Griggs.
Stacey, everyone knows that you guys do a tremendous job and that you are under enormous pressure. As I said, I've got family members and friends who are also working in the ED, so I know firsthand the extraordinary pressure you guys are under. And and there was a comment about there's no laughing matter, and that's exactly correct.
So how did you feel about Adam Giles laughing in Parliament today?
I'm answering the question.
Natasha, how did you feel about Adam Giles laughing in Parliament this week?
I didn't see what happened. I just heard some media reports. I heard that Adam wasn't laughing at the nurses. He was actually directing his remarks to the Leader of the Opposition. And I can tell you that if the issue is raised by one person, it's important. And I understand that there's 75 of you that have signed the petition, and I am an absolute advocate for making sure that we get better health services in the Northern Territory, and that's why I have been pushing for the Palmerston Hospital to make sure that you guys have the resources that you need, and I will continue to do that. The Palmerston Hospital, they'll start construction next year.
Natasha Griggs, can I ask, you have committed money for a Palmerston Hospital. Is there any commitment to improve services in the Darwin Hospital, which might be able to be applied sooner?
So I've been fighting for money for the Palmerston Hospital. I have not put any money towards. There's been no commitments this election campaign so far from us for extra resources at the Palmerston Hospital. At the Royal Darwin Hospital. But the Royal Darwin Hospital is a Northern Territory issue, and I would expect that the Health Minister, who's been made aware of the issues there, will be doing everything she can to make sure that you guys have the resources that you need.
Labor candidate Luke Gosling.
So I'm wondering why the sitting member remained absolutely silent when 100-bed facility funded by the Australian taxpayer, that is a short-term patient accommodation, otherwise known as the Medi Hotel, at Royal Darwin Hospital, is not being used for the intent that it was built for, which is to take pressure off the hospital. So the sitting member, it's extraordinary. The sitting member remains absolutely quiet when a federally funded facility is taken away from the Royal Darwin Hospital in order to relieve pressure on you guys down at the coalface. It is amazing.
You know that's not true, Luke. So stop
what have
with
they
the
used
lies.
it for instead?
Typical Labor lies.
Three people with alcohol issues are taking up a facility that's designed to take pressure off the Royal Darwin Hospital, and that's shameful. We have got $50 million to invest after already funding over $10 million on ED, making ED a more high-tech and good place for you guys to work. After doing that, we've got further funding for the Royal Darwin Hospital because we know that the Palmerston Hospital is important. That's why we've pressured these guys into funding it, to meeting our funding, but we also realise that the Royal Darwin Hospital needs funding, and we've committed that in this election cycle. The CLP is going to run the Royal Darwin Hospital down. That's what they're saying. And we don't believe that that is right. We believe that Palmerston and Darwin is big enough for two hospitals.
Natasha Griggs, I might just go back to you. You were talking over Luke there and saying, I heard you say Labor lies. What specifically was incorrect?
Well, Luke knows. Luke's been putting out this propaganda that the member's been silent on this, the member's been silent on that. Well, Luke, you know that's not true.
I do know.
It is not true. It is absolutely not true. So you can talk all this rubbish that you like.
So what did you say?
Well, I didn't.
So
I didn't just stay by and do nothing. The thing is, when the federal government, when the federal government gives the Northern Territory government money, and the Northern Territory government wrote to the federal government, Minister Plibersek, and said, we have a short-term urgent need for this money. We would like to redirect it for a set period of time. And so, which is what you would do. You would ask. And I actually supported the idea that they do that for a set period of time. And then the candidates got involved, and now they're just using it as a political football.
But ultimately,
it's not a political
football. The idea of using the Medi Hotel
for a short period of time, which is what the Northern Territory government. You know what? Territorians tell me they don't want Canberra bureaucrats telling them how to use the money here locally. They don't. Territorians know best. It might be Canberra money, but Territorians know better what to do with the money than some Canberra bureaucrat.
Do you not agree with that, Todd?
No, I agree that if Canberra specifically earmarks something for a specific purpose, it shouldn't be railroaded by the state government and be put into this rehabilitation purposes, because that's a flawed policy to start with.
So you think it's okay? You think it's okay if you come up with an idea and that you can't be flexible? You can't be flexible in the arrangements.
Not at the cost of hospital beds at the
even for a short period of time.
It's not a short period of time. It's a flawed policy, and we should go back to the banned drinkers register.
And Tim, who's our next question from?
Hi, my name's Kirstine. I've got a question for Natasha. I've asked you this question many times before and never had an answer. I'd like to know where you stand on the incarceration of indefinite incarceration of children in detention centres.
In detention centres? Well, I don't support the incarceration of children in detention centres. Well, we will stop the boats.
Stop the boats!
Under John Howard, the boats were stopped.
Under John Howard was too heavy.
And is that sufficient? That's your answer on this question? On the issue of asylum seekers in Darwin, we have had... Excuse me.
That's right, that's right.
On the issue of asylum seekers in the top end, we have had a question on the Facebook page for Darwin. A question was submitted pointing out that the seat of Solomon has in fact made an industry out of asylum seekers, and that there's 92 extra police, there's extra jobs involved. Think of all the contracts in accommodation and catering and laundry and security. Do you acknowledge that your policy would advocate essentially for local job losses, Natasha Griggs?
Well, oh, excuse me. I got my first job when I was 12. Is that okay? I'm good with money. Is that okay?
If we could just go back to the question, Natasha Griggs, businesses have made quite a lot of cash out of asylum seekers.
Business out of the industry. Detention centre, absolutely.
So
yes.
Your party's policies at the national level could actually hurt the local economy here. Do you understand that may in fact...
Absolutely, but I also think that the people that are providing the detention centre services realise that it was a model for under us, that business model won't continue under Labor. Well, it will. So, I think that...
On this issue, I might put this to Todd Williams from the Greens. Your policy is to increase humanitarian intake from 20,000 to 30,000 people. Once you get to 30,000 people, wouldn't you have to, essentially, to use the phrase, stop the boats then? What would happen at that point?
I think we'd have to, 50% raise in the number of intake of refugees is significant. There's no argument about that. It would ease a lot of the pressure and the reason for people to take that dangerous journey. But more importantly, the Greens advocate investing money in Indonesia, in housing and sheltering the people that are seeking refuge. You've got to remember that these are real people. They're not faceless people. And if you go down to the Darwin Airport Lodge on a Thursday, and I urge you all to do that, they have regular vigils there on Sundays and Thursdays, and just meet people. You'll see, I met a violinist from Iran. He's my Facebook friend now. These are real people, and we've got to think from these terms. This is a humanitarian crisis, and as the gentleman pointed out, arriving in Australia by boat unannounced is not illegal. We are, under international, we are obliged to deal with these people with respect, and we urge them to be released into the community as quickly as possible.
But is there something you could do to stop the boats, or is it a fake cap that you have of 30,000?
Oh, well, 30,000 is a big cap. I think it would be evaluated.
But there's millions of refugees across the world.
There are millions of refugees across the world, and no, we are talking about. Is a tiny fraction of the world's people seeking asylum. If you look at what's happening in Syria, in Turkey, in Lebanon, look at those camps. That is a crisis. What we're dealing with, we are a rich country who has sailed through the recent economic crisis. We've been boasting about how wonderful we have been. We can afford, our economy is doing well. We can afford not only to accommodate these people, but to absorb them into our society successfully.
I'm just going to go to a question now from Goldie, which is on this same issue.
Goldie, this is directed at the three of them, but in particular Luke. some of my question was answered before regarding the crowding at the hospital. First of all, Luke, how many illegal immigrants have come to the Territory since Labor has been in? What is the figure?
Is that
Both
your
adults
question?
and children, that's what part of the question.
No, we just need one question from you, Goldie, if that's okay.
Pardon?
So that's your question to Luke Gosling?
That's one, yeah, part of it, part of the illegal immigrant question.
Yeah, as we just heard, it's not illegal to seek asylum. It's, you know, so what's shameful is that the CL. Yeah, no, I've already said that, mate. But thanks for the tip. What is shameful is the CLP not long ago, in order to grab a headline in the NT News, said bedlam in our hospitals. You know how many people that are in detention being processed have been through the hospital? On average, about one a day. In that period of time, the last 12 months, there's been about 65,000 people go through the Royal Darwin Hospital ED. Those guys do need support. But the dog whistling is just incredible from the CLP. So, on to the question. Yeah, no, I've already said that. All right, so we're moving on.
Just keep going.
You don't want to answer any further on that question? You're happy? Is that sufficient?
Yeah, well,
let's move on, shall we?
There's no pressure on... What I will say is that we are a humanitarian country, and what we are doing in stopping people from dying at sea is important. And what we are doing in increasing the humanitarian intake is important. We have committed, unlike Mr Abbott, we have committed to increase the humanitarian intake so that those people most in need are going to be cared for. And, you know, I don't talk about this lightly. I've worked in Afghanistan. I know the very brave people and where they've come from. I've also run programs where volunteers go and spend time with detainees in detention. We are a humanitarian country, and we can all just put this in perspective and not let it just be taken over by the zealots and the unkind, because we are not an unkind country.
ABC local radio across the Territory. This is Todd.
Yeah, look, just to answer the question, the number of people seeking asylum who have come through the hospital, I'm actually surprised that there's not more people going through the hospital, because being kept in detention and in limbo for years to come is enormously injurious to mental health. And we've seen there's been report after report that people are suffering. Their whole lives have been used as a political football by both parties, and there's been incidents of self-harm. And why are they in hospital in the first place? Come on.
Let's move on, shall we? We only have 12 minutes left, or less, actually 11, as I look at the clock counting down, and there are lots of issues to discuss in this election forum for the seat of Solomon. Next question comes from Michelle.
Hello. My question's directed at all panellists, but in particular Natasha Griggs. I come from an education management background, and we're looking for a surety going into the future with funding from the Commonwealth. Two quick questions. Why are you unable to match Labor's length of commitment for Commonwealth funding? And in light of the Liberal cuts to education in states and territories, particularly the NT, how will you support quality education in the Territory with those cuts?
Thanks, Michelle. What we've done is we've said that we will match Labor's dollar for dollar for the first 4 years. That's because we want to have a look at the books and work out where we're at, and we understand that the schools needed certainty, and so we were able to provide funding certainty. So we were able to do that for the first 4 years.
So I should point out, though, that the first 4 years is the financial commitment was back-end loaded, right? So the first 4 years are the 4 years where the financial commitment is less.
Well, it's not. We're saying that we are matching dollar for dollar. Whatever Labor put on the table, we will match dollar for dollar for the next 4 years, so that the schools have some funding certainty. The other thing that we're doing is that we're taking away the command and control. So the schools will actually be able to decide where they spend that money, which is not the case in Labor's proposal. In Labor's proposal, you have the people in Canberra, bureaucrats, deciding where that money is best spent. And under the funding arrangements that I saw, schools such as Darwin High were actually going to lose money under that proposal, and schools in some of the remote regional schools areas where there was 6 or 7 students were actually going to get more money, because people in Canberra don't realise that the issue in the remote and rural schools is about getting the kids to school, not about having the extra resources there.
Can we just go back to second part of the question? The second part was about cuts being made at the territory or state level. So
there's no funding cuts under the federal Labor federal.
We're talking about the territory level. Territory level, the CLP have made.
So
real
the money.
cuts.
So the money that what we're proposing under as a federal coalition is matching dollar for dollar.
But is there something you could do to stop the CLP at the territory level from making cuts? I mean, why prop up with federal cash when they're making cuts at the territory level?
Well, I'm not.
Hold on, if we could just get Natasha to answer the question.
That's right. Well, Delia Laurie did spend all the money, but I don't get to have a say in what how the territory government spend their money. I have a say in getting federal funding to the territory, and the territory guys decide where best to spend that money. I'll certainly be advocating, and that's why I didn't get them to sign up to Gonski, because I didn't want territory schools missing out on money. At the moment, under whether it's Labor or Liberal, September 7, territory schools are going to get the same amount of money.
Now, if we could just move on
Same
to
amount of
Gosling,
money.
I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And you can respond to that point about the same commitment for the next 4 years. That is an entire election cycle, and so there is actually no commitment until after no difference in the commitment until after the next election, is there?
We have a 6-year commitment. We do. And the reason for that is because we need to change the current broken funding system where our kids are getting left behind and our teachers are getting sacked. I mean, we saw it down at Parliament House yesterday. 130 odd teachers, territory teachers that are teaching our kids, are going to be sacked. Our kids are falling behind. Our kids are falling behind. Now, I'm a father of a young daughter and I've got another kid on the way. And I want our kids to have the best possible education so that they're set up for the future. But we are falling behind, and Natasha Griggs has stayed silent while the CLP pulls the plug on $250 million worth of funding out of our schools, and then telling people that under Labor, who are putting in $375 million, are going to be further behind. So under Labor, every school in Darwin and Palmerston, every school in the territory will get the funding they desperately need to give our kids the education they need. Whereas my opponent has not only been not standing up for Territorians and their kids, she's also been not telling the truth and saying that teachers and schools in Darwin and Palmerston will be worse off under Labor. I mean, it's just not true. And we deserve a representative in Darwin and Palmerston that is going to fight and get as much federal funding and attention for our kids, our families, our workers as possible.
There's only 5 minutes left of this election forum for the seat of Solomon, and I can see the questions are stacking up too. Alyssa, we'll go to you next.
At the moment, there are lots of restrictions and lack of choices for women wanting to birth in Darwin. We'd like to see more birth options, more women-centred models of care and more consultation with consumers. How do you think you could best support birthing options for women in Darwin?
Can we give Todd a go? He didn't really...
Go ahead.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Todd Williams for the Greens. Here you go. I've got 2 kids. The second one was a home birth. I found having a home birth was an enormously amazing experience for the whole family. There was only three people or 4 people by the end of the process in the room at the time. I'm a big supporter of home births. Obviously, you'll have to gauge how the odds on regards to emergency situations with home births, but it's always sensible. Training of midwives, I think, is a fantastic thing. As far as options go, I think every mother, when they go into the birth experience. Every birth experience is different. They've got to be presented with a really robust range of informed decisions in regards to their birth experience. It can be a life-threatening thing, but we bring a new child into the world, and it's an enormously moving experience for the whole family, and people need to be informed and given the opportunity to birth where they want to.
Just briefly, if we could, because we do have another question I'd love to ask, but just a brief comment from, firstly, Luke Gosling.
Yeah, can I just give a big shout out to the Royal Darwin Hospital Birthing Centre, which is where we had our daughter Sally, and hi to my beautiful wife, and we'll be going there again. Women should have as many options as possible and be supported through their birth, and I just think that's a fantastic program. An absolutely fantastic program. Well done to everyone who's part of that.
Well, Luke, you're going to be surprised, but I actually agree with you. Women should have the right to have options available for them where they have their baby.
In furious agreement then, the panel, so we will move on. Zane, I'm hoping to get your question in just quickly. Zane?
Hello, it's to all the candidates. I'd like to know what your stance is on the fair indexation of military DFRDB, DFRB superannuation and military disability pensions.
Firstly to Natasha Griggs.
So the coalition's position on this has been is very clear. We've been supporting this. We took it to the last federal election, and I signed a pledge fighting for this. We took it to the Parliament, and unfortunately Labor voted against it, but I did note that they've introduced this as their policy now. It affects, we're introducing it from the age 55, and I think yours is 65, Luke. I'm a big, strong supporter of fair indexation for our veterans.
Luke Gosling?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I served Australia in the Army for 13 years. I've served overseas, and a lot of my friends have been to places like Somalia,
So
Rwanda,
on this issue of indexing
etc.
military pensions?
And what I do believe is that we should look after our service people, and that's why I've done a number of things. One, advocated strongly that DFRDB and DFRB superannuants do receive fair indexation, and we have done that. We have delivered that. Then the other thing is that more recent veterans from other conflicts, like a lot of my mates, should be recognised as well, and that's why I've lobbied and secured $35,000 so we can update the cenotaph in our amazing town to reflect the service of our younger veterans, and I think that's very important.
And Todd Williams, we are running out of time, but if you have a brief comment.
Just quickly, no, we support a fair and equitable response for the servicemen who have done the hard yards in conflicts around the world. Yeah, it's an easy one.
Thank you so much for your contributions here today to all of the candidates for the seat of Solomon. Up with us on the stage have been the Country Liberals' Natasha Griggs, the Greens candidate Todd Williams, and Luke Gosling, the Labor candidate as well. Thank you also to the other candidates who've joined us this morning from the minor parties. Apologies that there were candidates we didn't get to today, but I do invite you, if you're here in the Smith Street Mall and there's a candidate we introduced earlier that you would like to know more from or find out a little more about their policies, I'm sure they'd be happy to have a chat to you at this point in the campaign.
The Country Liberals member for Solomon, Natasha Griggs, and Labor candidate Luke Gosling joined me in the studio for a special election debate. Welcome to the program, Natasha Griggs and Luke Gosling.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we've got a lot of questions to go through, so we need to get through them quickly, so I'd appreciate if answers are concise and to the point. And we will start with the incumbent Natasha Griggs. Natasha Griggs, you have before identified cost of living as the main concern for the seat of Solomon and that you will ease that pressure. But how can anyone trust you given that your own party at a territory level made promises much the same, then got into government, hiked up power prices and began cutting jobs at the front line?
So with the coalition, we have identified that the cost of living pressures is one of the major issues, and a lot of that has been a direct result of the carbon tax. And what wasn't sold to Territorians when the Country Liberals government came into power 12 months ago was that there was a component of the power rises was a direct result of the carbon tax. So one of the key things that we're going to do if we're elected in next Saturday is to abolish the carbon tax.
But do you agree, though,
not
that
rename the carbon tax, but abolish the carbon tax.
But do you agree, though, that the carbon tax levy itself was a very small fraction of the increases that Territorians have put up with their power and water bills in the last year?
It was about 9% of the increases that the first power hikes. And it was about 9%.
Like the carbon tax levy was about 4% on average with Territorians' bills, and if you compare that to Country Liberals' increases, that was between 15 and 30%. So how can you say that really the carbon tax has been one of the main contributors to increases in cost of living?
The carbon tax is a tax on electricity, so it actually permeates through down to every aspect of our life.
But so does bill increases by the Country Liberals.
Oh, of course, because of the increase in electricity, and so the carbon tax is a tax on electricity, and as I said, it permeates down through every aspect of our lives. I mean, we have the air conditioning that, people are saying that they can't have their air conditioning on because of the cost of running it. So by reducing the carbon tax, people can that will permeate back down, because the reduction in costs will be passed on. The ACCC will be given more powers to make sure that those reductions will be passed on back to the consumers.
I might stop you there. So, Luke Gosling, one of the main promises that Labor itself made in the 2010 election campaign was to do with reducing the cost of living for Darwin and Palmerston residents by building 1,200 homes under its cheaper rental affordability scheme, NRAS. To date, 3 years later, you've managed 231. So given that poor record, why would anyone trust Labor to actually come through with its own promises?
So we've managed to build quite a few NRAS properties, as you said.
But only 231 of 1,200, that's not particularly impressive.
We've also, in cooperation with the NT government, entered into new partnerships where a lot more are going to be built. And in fact, just this past week, we had the Deputy Prime Minister in town announcing another 133.
That leaves you 800 short, though, doesn't it?
But don't forget that there's also 700 NRAS in the pipeline.
And when would that happen, though?
Throughout the territory. So as opportunities become available for investors, they'll take those opportunities and start building these properties, which then get rented out to people for 20% less than market rate. So it's a fantastic program, and it's rolling out throughout Darwin and Palmerston.
Do you have a time frame for the remainder of the properties you say are in the pipeline now?
I can't say exactly when the rest of the properties will be built, but it's a good program and it's a high priority for us, and we're working in cooperation with the NT government to make sure that land's available and that the investors have the opportunity to take advantage of that scheme, which is going to benefit Territorians who are finding it difficult, particularly with the cost of living pressures, to get into the market.
On housing still, Natasha Griggs, one of your main policy platforms or campaign platforms from 2010 was saving the RAF-based housing. You were going to excise the land, create a standalone suburb and make that available for Darwinites. It's not too late. The houses are still there. 1 or 2 have been removed, but by and large they're still there. So would you today recommit to doing what you said you would do in 2010, which is excise the land and create a standalone suburb?
Alyssa, a good question. And I've continued to campaign for this to save the RAF-based houses, along with Dave Tollner, who's the member for Fong Lim. My position on that has not changed, and although that as you said, some of the houses have been removed, if we're elected into government on September 7, I am very confident that we would be able to make those houses available that haven't been removed to Territorians. I know that...
Do you mean excising the land?
I'm still very keen to excise the land. That's what our commitment was.
Luke Gosling, would that be possible, considering you've worked in defence before? Do you have any concerns that this may actually be a bit of a hollow promise, or do you think it could be done?
There's 277 houses that are on that defence base. So let's remember, this is defence land. Those houses have been sold to a company called Northern Transportables, who will be on-selling them at good prices so that Territorians can get into the housing market. The land obviously is still there, but the houses, importantly, will be able to have work done to them so they come up to code, and Territorians who are finding it difficult to get into the housing market will be able to use them.
So with the RAF-based housing, this presented quite a problem to Labor in the 2010 election campaign. Natasha Griggs was making a meal out of you guys, although when I say you guys I mean Labor in particular. Labor neutralised the issue by caving in and saying that the houses wouldn't be demolished, that they would be removed and sold off. Nothing really happened. For 3 years they sat empty while Territorians went homeless during one of the most devastating housing shortages that people of Solomon have actually experienced. So why did Labor actually it won power, why didn't it actually do something instead of leaving Territorians in the lurch?
Well, there had to be proper processes in place about what was going to happen with those buildings and how they could be relocated and which ones were in fact fit for habitation. Lots of those houses aren't fit for habitation. Some of them are good. So in other words, some of them need a lot of work and some of them are not worth the effort. But
at no stage did Labor indicate it would take so long to save those houses, and it was something that essentially spiked Natasha Griggs's guns during the election campaign. Was that all that was about? Was Labor was just interested in neutralising the issue rather than providing something that was quickly going to be able to help Territorians?
Well, again, we had to follow a process, but the important thing is that those houses are going to be made available to Territorians now.
It's going to take 3 years to remove them, though, so that's another 3 years really on top of the 3 years we've already had. 6 years seems like a long lead time for a major promise.
So they are being removed, as you say, at the moment, and not only at the RAF base, but throughout Darwin. I mean, remember that we've built like nearly 700 houses out at Lyons and Muirhead. We've built nearly 1,000. When we've finished, there'll be 1,000 single living in apartments for soldiers out of Robertson Barracks. That takes a huge impost, not only in the community with Lyons and Muirhead, but on the barracks. You know, that means that all those soldiers and defence families have got really good accommodation, which is important, but they're also not taking other houses in the community that the members of the community need.
I'll just stop you there. So, Natasha Griggs, is it possible to be able to save those houses? They have been sold to Northern Transportables. What can you do?
Well, I think, as you pointed out, that under this current arrangement that Labor have, it will take 3 years to get to the end of that project. Now, the Minister decides on programs, and if there's a change of government, I am very confident that the new minister, if it's David Johnson, knows how passionate I am about this program and knows that I've been advocating for those houses to remain available to Territorians.
So you're confident you might be able to save them?
Absolutely. And as Luke has said, that they're removing them and making them available to Territorians, which is great, but they won't be able to be made available in the Greater Darwin area. They have to go out because of the costs that are involved in recertifying for cyclone coding and for insurance. So, which is what a very important issue that I actually raised at the last Territory election. But there's one other point that I wanted to pick up what Luke had said, that there was some more accommodation made or built at Robinson Barracks, which is correct, but there were more houses or more accommodation removed than was actually that was rebuilt, and that the accommodation was less than 10 years old that was pulled down. Right. So there is still a lot of pressure on the property market.
We'll just move on to the major promises been made by both sides here. The Palmerston Hospital, both sides have committed the same amount of funds to build it. The key question though really is who's going to staff it, who's going to work there. We've seen that the real problem is operational funds. We've had the Medi Hotel and dialysis centres not being able to be run because the NT government has said that it doesn't have the money to run it. So is either side here tonight able to say that they would be able to commit ongoing funds after the ribbon has been cut?
Well, can I answer that first? Sure. So our plan was always to build a hospital, and our plan as in the country Liberals was always to build a hospital that's going to grow with the community.
Growing with the community isn't the issue though, the ongoing funds are to run it. It is
growing to the community because you're not going to build a brand new, all functioning.
I'll have to stop you there. Is it operational funds that you would be able to commit or not? Because that's the key issue, not the building of it.
The operational funds we'll be working in with the Northern Territory Government to have a planned approach to make sure that the operational funding for the Palmerston Regional Hospital will maintain. Absolutely.
Gosling?
And can I just add one other thing?
Luke Gosling?
I'm really glad that the country Liberals have belatedly matched our increased funding. As people in Darwin and Palmerston know, I've been campaigning
The key
hard
question is
for
the
that
operational
Palmerston
funding.
Hospital.
Would you be able to provide operational funding? The NT government has repeatedly said that it's the cupboard is bare. So is there any money beyond the building of the hospital itself that Labor at a federal level would be willing to provide to run it, to find nurses and doctors?
So what I was going to say is throughout Darwin and Palmerston, as I've been door knocking through this campaign, I've been talking to all sorts of health staff, but particularly out in Palmerston where you've got doctors, specialists, cleaners, lots of nurses. We've got nurses graduating from CDU that can't get a job. So there's no doubt that the workforce will be available for a hospital out of Palmerston.
The workforce might be available. The question is who's paying for them?
So we need a second hospital, and obviously I can't commit the federal government to operational funding here with you tonight.
That's fine.
However, we would work in participation, or in partnership rather, with the NT government to make sure that it was possible to run 2 hospitals, because that's what we believe in. And we also believe in money for Royal Darwin Hospital, and we've put up $50 million for a paediatrics wing, a new children's wing, a state-of-the-art children's wing for RDH. So under Labor, you get both. You get investment in Royal Darwin, but you also get the Palmerston Regional Hospital.
Natasha?
Well, I was going to say that under Labor's plan, the Northern Territory government hasn't committed to their site. Labor came out the other day with the minister and said, here, we don't need to worry about the Northern Territory government. We've got the 110. This is the block of land. We're ready to go on this block of land, and we're doing it with 110. They've come out and said there's 150 because Northern Territory government are going to put in their 40. Well, the Northern Territory government did not commit to the block of land that Labor first proposed. We have got 150 million, on the new block, which is 45 hectares.
Another key issue here for the election campaign has been Gonski. Now, you've committed to matching Labor dollar for 4 years.
That's correct.
But the problem is the NT government has been cutting the education budget in real terms. It's also looking to reduce the number of teachers, increase minimum class sizes. Shouldn't the federal government, if you get in, shouldn't the federal government be ensuring that the Territory government at least maintains its funding levels? Otherwise, you're essentially subsidising their cuts and schools won't be any better off.
Well, can I just pick you up on the point? We're not going to be reducing any funding. What we're proposing is
No, I'm not asking whether you're reducing funding.
Dollar for
the
dollar.
Territory government is reducing.
Dollar for dollar. And under what Labor proposed, the schools like Darwin High will lose $12 million and Palmerston High will lose $11 million.
That's simply not true.
Those figures have been confirmed by an independent body. The Northern Territory Auditor General has confirmed that the Northern Territory government's assumptions in terms of the funding is correct. He's an independent body, he has said that under Labor's proposal it was going to be $11 million loss for Palmerston Hospital, Palmerston High School, $12 million for Darwin High School. That's something that I would not agree to. So I'm all about making sure that the Territory schools get more money. I'm also about making sure that the decisions about Territory schools are made in the Territory, not by some Canberra bureaucrat.
Luke Gosling?
This is a disgrace because the member for Solomon has not been standing up for families of people in Darwin and Palmerston. The member said today that the funding that she'd said to the NT government, don't sign up to Gonski because you'll be worse off. The federal government has been clear from the start that no school will be worse off. In fact, schools throughout Darwin and Palmerston are going to be on average about $1.8 million better off over the next 6 years under the Better Schools plan, which is about more individual attention for our kids, smaller class sizes, so our kids can get ahead. But that hasn't stopped Mrs. Griggs from telling families, telling teachers in Darwin and Palmerston that the schools are going to be worse off. It's just not true. And we know that the CLP is cutting teachers. We know that they're cutting $250 million out of the education budget, and our kids are getting left behind.
But as
a father, this is important to me. I've got a young daughter. We've got another one on the way, and everyone I've been speaking to throughout Darwin and Palmerston are clearly saying that do not let them cut our funding, and that's what's going to happen under Mr Abbott.
We're running out of time. We've got one last quick question for everyone. In the spirit of a positive campaign, what's the nicest thing you can say about each other? Who would like to go first?
I'm happy to go first.
Go on, Natasha Griggs.
I think Luke's got lovely, lovely eyes.
I think Mrs Griggs has some great qualities and has participated in this debate in a good spirit. I just hope that people out there realise that we've only got one representative down in Canberra standing up for us, and they can be assured that I will be standing up for Darwin and Palmerston.
And they know that for the past 3 years I have worked very hard to represent them to the best of my ability. I've never taken this role for granted. It's a very privileged role. So I understand why Luke's very keen to take it off me.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Luke Gosling and Natasha Griggs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for this week. Join us next week for a special national election program. Have a great weekend.